Hello, everyone. Today we're going to do something a little different. Last Sunday, I performed a dramatic monologue, something I wrote and I've done years ago at another church, and decided to bring it back. And I changed the script a little bit because New Testament scholarship has changed their ideas about a few things regarding the birth narrative. But what I was trying to do is look at the birth of Jesus through Joseph's eyes. Now, Matthew, of course, seems to give us the perspective more from Joseph's point of view, and it seems to center on him and Herod. Luke is the one who really tends to tell the story through Mary's eyes. It's interesting how those two birth narratives read like almost completely different stories. There's a few places where they overlap, like the fact that angels appear to them, the fact that Mary was betrothed to Joseph, and that's when she is pregnant, which would be incredibly shameful in the first century world. So, but for the most part, that's about the only difference, and the fact that she gave birth as a virgin. So what I want to do is look at Luke's version through Joseph's eyes, because it seems to me there are things that are happening in the story that when you put the two stories together, I'd not really considered how powerful Joseph's sense of responsibility would have been challenged, and the role that honor and shame would have played in the circumstances that Luke highlights, and that is that they were in Nazareth and they had to go to Bethlehem because of the poll tax. Matthew doesn't even mention they were once in Nazareth. He just starts the story with Jesus being born in Bethlehem. So when you put those stories together and try to see the significance of what's happening through Joseph's eyes, especially Luke's version, all of a sudden some color begins to show up in, I think, very meaningful ways. So I do a couple of things in the monologue that it assumes that there's some scholarship behind it that you may not be aware of. And by the way, New Testament scholars disagree on some of this stuff, but one of the things that has been assumed over the years that is really wrong is that there would have been an inn, a public house in Bethlehem. The word that Luke uses there is kataluma, and that's a word that really more narrowly means sleeping quarters, generally, where people sleep at night. And the first century home, especially in Jewish homes, would have been a single room dwelling that often would have two levels. And the upper level would be where they would sleep. And the lower level was kind of like the domestic area where during the day chores would be accomplished. It's where the women would prepare and all that. And it's true, at night, especially during inclement weather, they would often bring their animals inside to protect them. But when it was beautiful weather, and they would often instead tie up their animals outside. So there's a big debate. Would the manger be inside the house of Joseph's family or outside? But what we know is that Joseph and Mary weren't looking for a place to stay in an inn. That's really a bad translation. The word inn shows up in Luke chapter 10, the parable of the Good Samaritan. That word, pandakaion, really is an inn. There's even a mention of an innkeeper. And so I talk about in the monologue, that was a pretty shameful place to have to stay in the public house. So Luke is deliberate. He's talking about private quarters where people sleep. And I'm making the assumption that there's some shunning involved. The fact that he says there's no room in the kataluma, I believe, and also in light of what Matthew says, is that Joseph wanted to do what was right and divorce her, because having a child out of wedlock was just so shameful in those days. I think what Luke assumes you know is that Joseph's family shunned her and shunned him to preserve the honor of the family name. So I think it makes better sense, not only that they were not allowed to stay in the sleeping quarters as an act of shunning, And shunning would happen for a particular period of time. It wasn't indefinite. Once the dishonorable children would show proper shame, then they would be restored. And I think that probably happened after Joseph and Mary were married. Then Joseph's family would, welcome them. But there has to be a period of shunning to prove what they've done is wrong. So I think they were forced to stay outside. Most homes had mangers outside. And so I think that's what Luke assumes we know, is that Joseph and Mary were shunned. They weren't looking for a public house. Bethlehem wouldn't even need a public house. Those kind of places only showed up in the big cities. Instead, I think they were forced to give birth. Mary was forced to give birth to Jesus outside. So I hope you enjoy the monologue.
Boker Tov. Boker Tov, everyone. Shalom, good morning. I've come to tell you a story. But first, allow me to introduce myself. My name, Yosef Bar Yaakov. You call me Joseph. I know, I've been told I bear an uncanny resemblance to your pastor. We both have put on a few years. What I'm about to tell you happened a long time ago. It's a familiar story, but it's endured so many embellishments, I'm afraid it's hardly recognizable anymore. I'm talking about the night Yeshua was born, the one you called Jesus. Many, many strange things happened that night. There's no reason to add all these unnecessary details. I've come to tell you the truth. There was no drummer boy. There were no talking animals. There was no stable. There was no endless search throughout Bethlehem looking for a place to stay. No innkeeper shouting at us, "No room, no room." None of that happened. And the wise men, they didn't come until 2 years later when Jesus was a little boy. Now, I know I'm not trying to ruin the nativity scenes you put up every year. But I want you to know what really happened. I was there. For I am Mary's husband, Joseph the carpenter, the one whom Jesus called Father. But you don't need to take my word for it. Doesn't your Bible tell the story of the birth of Jesus? I'd like to look at Luke's version of the account. And I must say, he does a very good job of it, doesn't he? I want to pick up the story when Mary and I were forced to leave Bethlehem and go to, actually we were forced to leave Nazareth, and we went to Bethlehem for the poll tax. Octavian had this grand idea that the whole world should receive the benefit of Roman rule. Pax Romana, he called it. He wanted to bring Roman justice to all citizens, even imperial subjects. As far as we were concerned, the only thing Rome wanted was for us to pay for Roman justice. Taxes, taxes, taxes. Every time we turned around, there were more tribute to collect, more taxes to pay. It was hard enough as it is, making a living as a carpenter. I could bring in a steady wage. But then Rome decided we would have to go to the city of our birth, shut down our business. No matter how much we protested to the publican in Nazareth. Rome can count us here. He said, no, only natives can stay. The rest of you must go to the city of your birth. We asked him, how long will it take? He said, how would I know? I dreaded telling Mary. She was already beginning to show that she was expecting our firstborn. I say our firstborn, but the angel made it clear to her and to me that this child was not mine. Although no one believed it. Everyone thought we were trying to blame our shameful circumstances, having a child out of wedlock, on God. Who ever heard of a virgin mother? It was a contradiction in terms, but we knew the truth. The angel had told Mary, "Behold, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. And for this reason, the holy offspring shall be called the Son of God." Mary had already begun to prepare our home for the new arrival. Everyone else, our neighbors, expected that we would want to leave Nazareth, ashamed and trying to get a new start in a village far, far away. But we had already decided we were going to stay here, endure all the public ridicule. We knew we had done nothing wrong, but God was on our side. But then Rome decided we were going to have to leave anyway. So I closed down my shop. We packed up our things. And we traveled all the way to Bethlehem, the town of my birth. Now I know what you're thinking. Luke says that when we came to Bethlehem, that the days had been completed for Mary to give birth. And you would expect that my family would have received us with open arms, that they would have showered us with the affection that comes with every family reunion. But that didn't happen. As soon as they saw that Mary was pregnant and that we were not married, it seems the honor of my family name became more important than our needs. We were shunned as dishonorable children, not allowed to stay with the family. No matter how much I protested to my father, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? He gave me a stone cold look in his eyes and said, "The house is full. There's no room for you here." Homeless people in our day would typically stay in a public park, like the one outside of Jerusalem, called Gethsemane. Ironic, isn't it, that Jesus would spend his last night on earth the same way he came into the world, among the outcast, among the homeless, among the dishonorable. I was so ashamed. This was my hometown. I couldn't even find a decent place for us to stay. What was I going to do? There was no public house in Bethlehem. Our little town was too small. We didn't need it. People wouldn't come to Bethlehem unless they had to. Besides, an honorable man like me shouldn't have to pay for hospitality. In our day, you could travel anywhere in the land of Israel, go into any town and village, and even be a stranger to the people. And if you were an honorable person, they would welcome you with open arms. Every act of hospitality would be showered upon you. They'd give you a place to stay. They would provide a meal for the evening, even shelter for your beast of burden. But the dishonorable, the shameful, they knew they would never be taken home. Instead, they would stay in the public park, or during inclement weather, they would stay in the public house, a rat-infested, disease-ridden dirt floor hovel for lowlifes and no accounts. The kind of place a Samaritan would stay if he found himself having to bed down for the night in Jewish country. You know, like the one Jesus talks about in that parable that you call the Good Samaritan. Travelers moving around Israel would look for one of these public houses outside the big city. These outsiders knew they would never be welcome in anyone's home, and so they would seek them out. And the inns were horrible Horrible place to stay. Many of them doubled as brothels. No self-respecting man would be caught dead sleeping there. So, when Luke talks about the fact that we were looking all over Bethlehem for a place to stay, it didn't happen like that. It wasn't an inn. In fact, the word that Luke uses refers to the private quarters in everyone's home, like the one in my father's house where the whole family got to stay, except us. We were left to fend for ourselves, sleeping outside, huddled against the wall, where my father would keep the animals. This signaled to all of Bethlehem that my family was ashamed of us, that we were being properly shunned to protect the honor of my family name. Then one night, it happened. Mary woke me up and said, "It's time." And immediately she began to cry out loud with the horrible pangs of childbirth. I thought, oh, no, not here, not now. And as I tried to comfort her, trying to help her through labor, I didn't know what I was doing. I thought, how are we going to do this? How am I going to do this? Then suddenly, it happened all so fast. With a cry in the night, our little baby boy was born. I stood in stunned silence. Mary was the picture of serenity, knowing exactly what to do. She had prepared strips of cloth to bind his arms and legs to keep him warm. Slowly, meticulously, she began to wrap his little arms and legs like she had done it 100 times before. Then, after tucking away the last binding, she took Jesus into her arms and turned to me with a smile of sweet relief. I took the picture in. Everything faded from view. All I could see was my beautiful wife, a mother and child, and the radiance of a moment born in time. I came to her side. I took Jesus into my arms, and the weight of taking care of this newborn child came home to me. Hands that fashioned wood now hold the child of promise. Instead of being born to a royal family, he was born to a simple man like me. A carpenter will teach the one who is to become the Messiah of Israel. I beheld the face of the Son of God and wondered, how could it be this baby in my arms, sleeping now so peacefully, the Son of God, the angel said, how could it be? Lord, I know he's not my own, not of my flesh, not of my bone, but Father, let this baby be the son of my love. Father, show me where I fit into this plan of yours. How can a man be father life I've been a simple carpenter. How can I raise a king? How can I raise a king? He looks so small, his face and hands so fair. And when he cries, the sun just seems to disappear. But when he laughs, it shines again. How could it be? Father, show me where I fit into this plan of yours. How can a man be father to the Son of God? Lord, for all my life I've been a simple carpenter. How can I raise a king? How can I raise a king? How could it be? This baby in my arms, sleeping now so peacefully. The Son of God, the angel said, how could it be? How could it be? Suddenly, the chill of the night air, our pitiful circumstances brought me back to reality. Mary needed help, so I took Jesus and we decided to put him in a manger. That was the best cradle we could find. As I was attending to Mary's needs, I kept rehearsing the night's events. Every emotion flooded over me all at once. Anger, pride, pity, sadness. Why did it have to be this way? This was no place for a king to be born. I couldn't believe it. Why would God let something like this happen? Why didn't anyone help us? Of all things, my little family is seeking shelter like an animal, and the Son of God is forced to sleep in a feeding trough. As I stood there in my righteous indignation, questioning the purposes of God, they came. Shepherds were sheepishly approaching us, lurking in the shadows, acting like they were up to no good. I startled them when I questioned their attentions, and all of a sudden, they just stopped and stood there for a while, looked at us from a safe distance, and didn't do a thing. And just about the time I was ready to shoo them away, one of them walked over and peeked into our makeshift cradle. And seeing Jesus, he said, "It's true. He's here." Just like they said. At that moment, his face turned white, and some of the shepherds began to dance around, laughing and celebrating. The others just kind of stood there slack-jawed, not knowing what to do. I thought the commotion had attracted their attention. I was going to tell them, "We're okay, you need to move on," when one of them came over and said, "You don't understand. Angels appeared to us. They told us our Messiah was born in Bethlehem, and here he is." It was all too much to take in. It felt like a strange dream. Some of the shepherd boys began to come and take a look at Jesus. So they're kind of giggling, pointing at him. Others began to tell Mary what had happened, all talking at the same time. I didn't think it was necessary for them to be there. I was going to shoo them away when the first boy said, "Look, no more than an hour ago, we were keeping the night watch. And the angel of the Lord, the messenger of the Lord, came to us and told us that our Messiah was born in Bethlehem. And so we wanted to come and see him." And I interrupted and said, "Wait a minute, how did you know to look for him here?" He said, "Oh, the angel gave us a sign. He said, you will find the Christ child wrapped in strips of cloth, lying in a manger, in a feeding trough." His words hit me like a hammer. I thought my heart would just pound out of my chest. All of a sudden, everything came into focus for me. God had not let us down. I had not failed my family. Everything happened according to plan, according to his plan. For the Lord, praise be his name, in his infinite wisdom, decided that this Messiah was to be born for every single one of us. You would think that the Son of God would be born to nobility and not peasants, that he would be visited by royal dignitaries and not common shepherds, that the finest palace furnishings would wrap the child of God in a beautiful golden cradle rather than him forced to stay in a feeding trough. But God decided, Jesus, he became one of us so that we might become one of his. Praise be the name. Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Let's sing together, shall we? Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. Nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Come on, sing it. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love. Merry Christmas.
Thank you for watching our KAIT broadcast. Each Sunday we gather at 8:45 as well as 11 o'clock to worship as a family of God. We would love for you to come and worship with us at either of our services at 701 South Main, right here in Jonesboro. If you've experienced a blessing from the Lord today, would you consider giving in a way that others might be able to experience a similar blessing? Feel free to mail a check to the church, or you can visit our website for electronic giving. Once again, thank you for worshiping with us today.